Mr. N.M. Kusti, for this webinar, special webinar series. It's a forum in which every time we discuss some topical issue and try and find answers to complex questions. We have discussed, last time we discussed about the farmers issue. So this is after 7th of February, the environment disaster has become a larger question, whether it is an ecological disaster, man-made, or it is a natural disaster. That's the question which is uppermost in our mind. Although government would like to say that it was a natural disaster, it cannot do anything much about it. But many environmental activists say that it is because of the responsible conduct of the state governments that such disasters are happening. We had in 2013 the major Kedarnath tragedy. After that, a lot of committees were held, a lot of reports were brought in, but successive governments have paid a deaf ear to it. And that is the reason why we find a situation where our people, especially people in the lower round of society, have paid the price for being the victims of a natural disaster. But that's a question which we need to debate. We need to look at both the points of view, and in the last 2 weeks, the matter has been hotly debated, and government has emphatically said that the Char Dham project, which has been on, where blasting of roads and damming, all that process that is on, that has not contributed to this disaster. But the activists say otherwise. N.M. Kusti would be in a much better position than all of us to throw light on this, whether how far it is a natural disaster or it is a disaster caused by human negligence. Mr. Kusti has almost 30 years of experience in handling natural disasters, in looking at the different kind of catastrophes that has happened since the 1990s. And that's why when we requested him to speak on the subject, he readily agreed. Thank you so much, sir. And we would like, as discussed, we will have your presentation in about 30-40 minutes, which will be followed by question answer. Mr. Kusti.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Mohanty. I'm grateful that I'm getting an opportunity to speak to the students and faculty in communication. It is a very humbling moment, especially. Let me share an anecdote. You would know Dr. Varghese Kurian, all of you, who placed India at the global map, making it the largest milk producer in the world, overtaking United States many, many years ago. And we have such an enviable position that even if we stop producing more milk, United States will take 2 decades to reach our level. That is the kind of height India has achieved. He used to be my mentor, okay. and I worked with him for many years. He used to appreciate many of my good qualities, but he used to reprimand for some of my shortcomings. And communication used to be one of those shortcomings for which I used to get repeated reprimands. And even he went to the extent of posting a communication specialist as a support staff to me to help me in improving my communication. And his standing instruction to me was that for making every presentation, I must go through a rehearsal. So these are the kind of things he asked me to do because I was required to make presentation at very senior level to the committee of secretaries, cabinet secretary, the technology mission, and the like. So, and the international forums and all that. So this is very it's an interesting situation that today I'm daring to speak to the communication community, the students and faculty, which is not my forte. So in the process, you might make some errors. I think you will kindly bear with me. Uh, so that is the beginning. So with this caveat, let me start talking about the natural and disaster. Natural disaster, but we'll try to demystify or dissect what is natural, what is unnatural, what is disaster, what is not disaster. So, actually, disaster is a effect of hazard, and hazard is often it could be natural or it could be human induced or technology induced kind of hazard, and hazard affects the society, and it's hazard is, what is hazard? Hazard is an abnormal event on the earth. When we say abnormal event on the earth, it could be under the soil, under the earth, or above the earth, and water or air and things like that. So it could be anything, and that consequently affect the society. And if the society, if the area where the people community lives or the infrastructure is there, if they are not better off, so it affects them seriously. So the hazard has got a variable effect on the society, and it is depends on how vulnerable is the location, geography, the community, and what is the capacity of the community, capacity of the systems and institutions and all that. So that determines the intensity of the disaster. So hazard becoming a disaster is greatly dependent on the the conditions in which the society uh, is situated. So therefore, at some place, that's why we start talking about that how resilient we are. If we are resilient, that means our coping capacity of dealing with the hazard is better, or we are less vulnerable, then our resilience is better. If this natural hazard comes, we will be able to bounce back, or we will be able to face the hazard in a meaningful manner, or even a least impact manner, so that we get better resilient. So that we say that we need to become more and more resilient and all that. So this is the definition, or this is the background on which the whole disaster management discourse is based on. And in India, incidentally, India is the home to all kinds of disaster. Even we didn't experience tsunami, we experienced tsunami. Our traditional disasters used to be flood, cyclone, but now we have also begun experiencing all the kind of disaster, except maybe the volcanic eruption we have not experienced in India. Otherwise, all kinds of disaster we have experienced. And India being a big country with variable ecological conditions, it is natural that we are subjected to all kinds of disasters. And not very many years ago, in the towards the turn of the century, around 99, little before the Odisha super cyclone, the government of India started looking at disaster as a area that needed priority attention. And there was a high-powered committee led by Dr. J.C. Pant, which was formed, and they studied the disaster management systems in all over the world, many several countries, and all that. There is a big group, and they made very clear recommendation as to how as a nation, we should look at disaster management. And after that, only in 2005, the Disaster Management Act was set up, Act was passed in the Parliament, and the system, the disaster management policy, plans, structure was put in place, and all that. And since then, I have been somehow been involved in this whole process, and I'm very happy to share with you that I made good contribution in the making suggestion for the Disaster Management Act, and in the policy making, in the plan making, several things that has happened, and I was a part of that. So that became a integral part of my profession, from purely social development to disaster management was a shift. And I was also involved in writing the global standard on quality and accountability in the disaster or humanitarian crisis. It is called the SPEAR guidelines, and this is considered as the Bible for all disaster management professional, humanitarian professionals. And from there we have set up created a coordinating platform, coalition of all humanitarian organizations, all organizations working in the area of disaster management to come on a single platform, and we created SPEAR India. I conceptualized this and we set it up and all that. It is now 21st February is the day when the SPEAR India was set up many years ago. And then we have gone from the national level to the state level to the district level and all that. It's still in progress, and I pursued it very vigorously against a lot of opposition that government is the biggest humanitarian player. Many of the humanitarian organizations, they didn't like my idea, and even the international forum, when I started talking about that the government is the primary duty bearer and all that, they say that government is the primary duty bearer, but government is not a humanitarian organization. I argued very strongly, and today government is considered as the paramount humanitarian player, and they are a part of this our national coalition, and then not only in India, all over the world, the coordination between the government and the non-government organization has been institutionalized and getting more and more institutionalized. So this is what has happened over the years. And this, looking at the disaster, there is a protocol called Sendai Framework of Action. And this Sendai Framework of Action was signed off in 2015, and it is the period under which this Action Act, the framework will apply is 2015 to 2030. But let me give you a little quick background about this Sendai Framework of Action. Before 2015, to look at the disaster, there was another framework called Hugo Framework of Action, HFA. HFA was from 2005 to 2015. So when we started working on this Sendai framework, we started looking at what has happened globally in the period during 2005 to 2015, during the Hugo Framework Action period. And some figures let me share with you that there are several disasters in the world. About 1.5 billion people were affected in the various types of disasters. Nearly 1 million people had died, and 1.5 million people were injured. 23 million rendered homeless. 150 million people were displaced. $1.3 trillion assets were lost, and then if such a massive impact, so some kind of analysis was made, and the few pointers I will share with you. One of the pointers was mentioned that in the future the climate change, and then also in the 2005 to 2015, the climate became one of the biggest cause of disaster, and the second biggest cause was very poor risk governance. that means the state role also was indicated. And in inefficient coordination, disaster is the very, which all stakeholders need to be coordinated for very efficient responsive action. Uh, so that inefficient coordination was there. And the next reason was, the root cause was that lack of early warning. Uh, it was what is going to happen, how fast we can tell, and how people can take corrective actions and all that. And the last not but the least was that inability of the states to take primary responsibility. So these were some of the things that there is unanimity. All the countries agreed. The humanitarian community put up this argument, and there was an agreement, and that led to formation of this Sendai framework of action. And this Sendai framework action made some of the things. There was four priorities. The Sendai framework action said. The first, the priority is understanding disaster risk. That means every stakeholder, including the community, must understand disaster risk. So the risk informed risk communication. So that brings the role and importance of the communication community, people like you, to say that how the risk communication is passed on to people, to stakeholders, to institutions, to the duty bearers and all that. The second priority was that the strengthening risk governance. That was what was found out during the period of Hugo framework of action. It was reiterated that the risk governance must be strengthened. Then priority three was investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. That means how you will improve your capacity, how you will reduce your vulnerability through the systems, processes, technological instruments, and all that kind of thing. So this is a huge work the priority three indicated. And the priority four, that extending the disaster preparedness for effective response, so that when you, after the disaster, you try to build back, you create a better situation, so that such disasters are the impact of those disasters are minimal, or disasters are avoided. So that means like to will be in a position to interpret whether it is a natural disaster, what is a human-induced disaster, what it is, and all that. So let me explain first briefly in a simpler manner. Let me explain what Chamoli disaster is like. You have seen, you must have been seeing the internet, a lot of pictures, a lot of videos, and a lot of articles, a lot of discussion that is going on, a lot of debates and all that. But what has happened that Himalayan region, very clearly the climate scientists, the climate change community, which made analysis and predicted, and which got accepted all over the world, they made a very specific statement about the Himalayan zone, that it is a ecologically fragile zone that needs care. And they also warned that this could lead to serious hazards because the glacier melting is taking place, the the climate change impact is becoming visible, the global warming is taking place. So Himalayan region is an ecology that needs a lot of care and protection and vigilance. and in this, in the top of this Himalayan, there are snow peaks, and snow peaks. There will be sometimes there will be glaciers, and these glaciers will fall. And then it will melt. And so, in the natural process, there are the water reservoirs. So these are called lakes, and so the lakes are formed on the in the upper stretch of the Himalayan. So that happens, and so these the temporary natural lakes are formed, and water remains there, and all that. And whenever there is a burst, maybe because of cloud burst, maybe because of the ice blocks falling from the top, it will come down and it will break the embankment of those lakes. And when it breaks, then the water from there will come, and then further ice will fall. Then it will, when it comes from a very top, very from very higher elevation, the momentum, the mass, the water mass, the mud, the ice blocks, the stones, everything will come together. It will gather huge momentum, and as it comes down, it starts breaking more and more of those lakes. So what happens then? It becomes a very powerful kind of flood that we saw in 2013 in Kedarnath. It happened, and Kedarnath it happened because of the cloud burst. Uh, and it in recently in Chamoli, it something it happened, but there was no cloud burst in this situation. It was the glaciers, and then the lake burst, and it came. And when it started coming down, then we had these huge structures that was coming up. Got dams. Some people say that there are 300 dams in the making. Some people say that 60 dams were in the making. Number I do not know, but certainly it's a fact that there are several dams are in the making, or have been made, and for many purposes, that is a separate issue, and those they started getting affected. And fortunately, these when this flooding was taking place, there was no habitation. So immediately there is no impact on the habitation. But when it coming down, when we saw the NTPC plant, and then the other power stations, they got severely damaged and all that. So and then the water came down on towards the plain. When it reached the plain, what has happened? Of course, the further analysis will indicate that these sludge, this mud that water has carried from the top are in the on the river bed. So resultantly, the river bed has become short. The water holding capacity of the river has reduced. That means the water, the siltation has the silt has gathered. So the water holding capacity has reduced. So it is my analysis, it's my interpretation. I may be wrong. I wish I will be wrong. That in the coming monsoon, the danger for flood is probably much more in the plain where the community lives, where your basic infrastructure exists and all that, because that is on the nearer the plain, and it is very difficult to dredge. The You cannot dredge on that kind of elevation, and the kind of elevation, the dredging is absolutely ruled out. So we have to live with it. So how we deal with it is the next question is coming. So having explained you this the occurrence of this disaster, so I will like to make some comments to help you make an interpretation, because I am not making an interpretation to say that it is a natural disaster or a human-made disaster, but I am making a kind of a analysis, and which will be the basis based on which you could make a judgment or you could make an opinion that how natural is this natural disaster. Number one, after the 2013 episode, there was a huge uproar, and there was no denial to the fact that Himalayan ecology need to be protected. Therefore, the activities which endanger the ecology has to significantly reduce. That was the decision, that was the call, and but we did not see anything that changed. In fact, the construction got multiplied. We created, in fact, the infrastructure development was much more rapid in the region, and there are hotels because it's a tourism place. Yes, people go for pilgrimage and all that. There is huge construction of hotels and all that. There are a lot of things happened for economic gain. But let me bring a point that for everything we have got two instruments. One instrument is called disaster risk assessment. Another instrument is environment impact assessment. And the third element which again coming out of this assessment is your cost benefit analysis. And when you say cost benefit analysis, it's not only economic cost benefit analysis, it is also subsumes social cost benefit analysis. So when we do this kind of investment, and how appropriate, how properly we have done the disaster risk assessment, how properly we have done the environment impact assessment, and how properly we have looked at the social cost benefit analysis and then this decision was made to have this huge investment. So therefore, I feel very upset, and I'm an engineer and I'm a management professional. So I feel that people from my community has definitely erred, and they have committed a blunder because there is something called the ethics of science, ethics of engineering. If I do something and I can justify technically, I can justify economically, but if I am not able to justify socially and from the people perspective, then this knowledge is of no value. So therefore, I feel that the engineering community, the scientific community, when they started designing these structures and they could see that the danger behind this, why they did not put their foot down to say no to it? Why they say that we will not do it? Like I say often that plastic, when plastic came into this society, everybody was gaga that plastic is going to change the world and change our life and all that. And today we are saying that we are beginning to say, when creating campaign, that please say no to plastic. Why we did at the time of discovering the plastics, I think our scientific community then knew that what are the danger associated with it. So why they did not stop it? The similar is the case here, that when a designer, an engineering designer is designing something and is able to see that the danger behind it, why it is not raising flags. So that is a point this is a charge I am making to my engineering fraternity. So therefore something we say that for every research or every design there should be a process of ethics. So where was that ethical standard that has gone for that? And then this is the first accusation I am making. The second accusation I am making, that why our public system or the primary duty bearer, why we did not be responsive, knowing fully that Himalaya need protection. And just because China on the other side is also fiddling with Himalaya and disturbing the ecology, we have to retaliate to China by creating similar danger to Himalaya. And if we believe that Himalaya is the home of our originator, Lord Shiva, then we should have respect to protect this Himalaya. Why we are destroying Himalaya by creating huge structures and creating this kind of infrastructure and all that? Look at, when you disturb, when you make construction, you disturb. When you road, you disturb the ecology. When you make a tunnel, some people say that we are not blasting, but you are doing controlled blasting. We are definitely using machine to create tunnel. Also, all these things cumulatively definitely is contributing to the disturbance on the whole structure of the Himalayan region. And this disturbance is leading to the disaster. So, who is responsible for the disturbance? The human being is responsible, the state is responsible, the community is responsible, the businessmen are responsible, the engineers are responsible, the social scientists are responsible, the economists are responsible, because they have never thought that what is going to be the outcome, how painful it is going to be by ignoring all these things. So, therefore, I'll say that in that perspective, this Chamoli disaster is a human-induced disaster. The first positioning I made, that Chamoli disaster is a natural disaster. The second positioning argument is that it is not a natural disaster, it is a human-induced disaster. So, this is the judgment is yours, the interpretation will be yours, and how we have to deal with it. So, I want to stop here and then respond to your very specific questions, so that we can get something interesting out of the discussion. Over to you, Dr. Mahanti.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a very, very insightful presentation. I would like to ask whether the government of India at the government level, or even Uttarakhand government or Himachal Pradesh government, have they done any of these cost benefit analysis, at least officially? And what have been their general take in the matter?
No, to my best of my knowledge, there is no social cost benefit analysis. There is economic cost benefit analysis must have been done, because for all investment these are necessary, because the fund will not come unless you do that. So, they must have done that. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there are any social cost benefit analysis. And also to the best of my knowledge, the environment impact analysis, whether has been done properly or not. Like when you make an analysis assessment, let's look at the dissect what you make an assessment, and then after, what is the purpose of assessment? Assessment purpose is to understand the nuances so that you can plan. So, after assessment you make a management plan, and then you implement, that is implementation plan. Then while doing the implementation plan, you start auditing it to find out whether the factors highlighted in the assessment has been adequately addressed to deal with the issues identified. So, audit, and if it is not properly done, then you correction or a review of those the implementation plan that is being done. So, that is the process of this, the whole the purpose of the whole environment assessment, all the disaster risk assessment. But I don't think any disaster risk assessment was done, because till today disaster risk assessment is not been institutionalized in this country. Although it has been talked at the highest level, Prime Minister has told, and Prime Minister's Principal Secretary has gone on record saying several times that disaster risk assessment is a fundamental thing. But as a structure, as a society, as an institution, we have not been done it properly. So that is some of the probably the shortcomings. Did I answer
Even
your
the
question?
environmentalists, I would like to know whether the environmental activists, whether they have done any social cost benefit assessment of such projects?
The environmental activists, they have flagged the issues. They have analyzed. They have told several times that how it is creating danger and all that. Even you will be, you could all remember based on those analysis, the environmental activist analysis. Our late Sushma Swaraj in the parliament had spoken very eloquently that the cost that will incur in attending to the losses that will happen out of Himalayan disaster is going to be many times more than the investment that we are making to make this the construction, all the dams. And that time there were 60 dams, and she had made a call to the government that all these dams construction must be stopped now. And the parliament listened to her and kept quiet. And now that is, I don't know, the 60 dams has probably become 300 dams now. Some people, some newspaper reports say that there are 300 dams in the making and all that kind of thing. So, so, how the decision is taken, how the alarm bell doesn't ring, how the alerts do not make any sense, what leads to a decision? Whether it is just the um, profit, uh, the human lives doesn't have any meaning, our livestock lives do not have any meaning, our environment quality doesn't have any meaning. It's money that has got only meaning. And these are all my reactions. Sorry for this.
But is it true that after the 2013, the Kedarnath tragedy, a lot of hydropower projects were shelved. They were closed down. That's what is the report saying.
But then if that is so, then how 60 dams became 300 dams? If that is shelved, why this Chamoli power project was being conceived? Why it could not be shelved? And it could have been the legacy of the past government, whoever became the government. I'm not pointing fingers on any particular government, but when the scientific community, the environmental community, and people at large, they demanded that Himalayas should be protected, why we did not become responsive? It was our duty. That's my take.
Okay. Now over to Dr. Giri. Any question?
Thank you, Sri Mohanty. I was reading up somewhere that in 2019, IPCC came up with a report and warned that glaciers are going to melt. So that was a direct hint that we should be prepared. But was it not an authentic report, or Government of India or people concerned like NDM and others are least bothered about such predictions? So I wanted Mr. Prusti to react to that.
No, IPCC reports are very authentic. I think enough debate has been done on IPCC reports analysis, and the whole world now concedes that IPCC is the best possible analysis that is available for the mankind. So we say that this is honored. So Government of India also respects and honors the IPCC reports, and the observation that glaciers will melt was very clear, and therefore there are warning systems and all those things are being put in place and all that. But how efficient we are, that's another question. But and why glaciers are melting? What promotes glacier will melt, but there is something called GLOF, glacier lake outburst flood. So the GLOF takes place because of the kind of things that happened in Chamoli this time is a kind of GLOF. So so that situation, if we could have, maybe the glacier melt we could not have avoided, but we could have probably avoided that if the structure of the activities would not have been done and all that, it would have happened slowly, with a less intensity. And even if it would have done, it would not have affected the environment, affected the community and all that. We could not have faced such kind of disaster where we are still the 150, 200 lives were still uncertain whether they are alive or dead kind of things. and then the imminent danger, the downstream danger we are now anticipating. Yes.
A supplementary, it's about fixing the accountability of the people. Now we know that in a situation of mass violence in sectarian riots or protest violence, very quickly and very meticulously the accountability is being fixed. In a state of Uttar Pradesh, the assets are being confiscated. So in a situation like this, which a disaster which could have been either avoided or lives could have been saved. When so many lives are lost in the name of disaster, shall we forget it? Or is there any mechanism, in your experience, in any disaster so far, starting from tsunami, etc., um, has any accountability been fixed or people have been taken to task?
Disaster Management Act has provisions for fixing accountability. But in India, our laws are also that accountability is there, legal provisions are there, and the
तो तुम खींच के ले आई हो। अरे ना बाहर देख लो अब तुम देख लो पेट्रोल पंप नहीं है पेट्रोल हमारे दिन में खुद
Devendra,
Cross connection, yes, sorry.
पेट्रोल भरत चार्जर बेस्ट हो ये न्यूज़ 20
Okay. So the Disaster Management Act has provisions for fixing accountability, but then it is to be known. So there has to be an assessment, and I understand that Government of India is contemplating a multidisciplinary assessment of the situation, and I'm sure they will do it because it is such a disaster that it cannot be pushed under the carpet. An assessment will find out that what could have been done better, and if anyone to be made accountable, probably that will be done. I'm sure that will be done.
Thank you.
Dr. P.C. Singh?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for presenting a wonderful, insightful discourse to us. My specific question, but it's a broad one, is that where do you find the solution? You see, many people are protesting against this kind of things all over the world, not only India, and people are writing on this also. And in course of teaching my students this subject, I come across lots of reports about ignorance of environmental protection act or initiatives, and particularly this ignorance in recent years. It is, and a number of protests by social activists, environmental activists were also going on. I came to know about through Down to Earth and so many other specialized magazines. Do you find any more ignorance on this specific issue in India in recent years?
Yes, you are very right. That's why in my talk I was mentioning about the priority number one of the Sendai Framework of Action, where India is also a signatory. So focus is that understanding disaster risk. That means the risk communication is paramount. It's the number one priority. So therefore, and risk communication to people and risk communication to the stakeholders. And who are the stakeholders? Community is a stakeholder, government is a stakeholder, business is a stakeholder. So everybody. So how the stakeholders communication is done? The specific and your risk communication for a particular stakeholder has to be done in a particular manner. That is lacking, and I'm sure the people in the government system they did not know the danger to this extent, and the people living, the people who were locked inside the tunnel, do you think that they knew that it's so dangerous? They didn't know. Do you think that the NTPC people who designed this plant, they knew that this is the kind of danger that it could have happen? Probably, I'll say that 90% probably they didn't know. So the scientific community, the engineering community who designed, did they know? Even if I think some of them knew, but they didn't have enough courage or enough conviction to stand up and say that this is going to be devastating and let's not do it. At least I'll not do it. I'll not be a part of this design process. So risk communication is very important, and we have done a lot of progress in communicating risk to the stakeholders, but still it is inadequate. So this priority number one needs ultra attention, extreme attention.
Mr. Sindhuja? Is Mr. Jha listening?
Connectivity problem.
झा सर माइक ऑन कर लीजिए अपनी तरफ से।
अब मेरी आवाज आ रही है सर? वंडरफुल योर discourses, we have learned a lot. I'm just asking a supplementary question what Dr. PC Singh has just raised, because the risk is the probability that a hazard will turn into a disaster, and vulnerability and hazards are not dangerous. लेकिन अगर इसको हम अलग-अलग लेते हैं, and what if they come together, they become a risk, or the probability that a disaster will happen. ये इसमें हमको ये ऐसा लगता है environment में. Nevertheless, risk also can be reduced or managed if we are careful about how we treat the environment, and if we are aware of our weaknesses and vulnerabilities to existing hazards, then we can take measures to make sure that hazards do not turn into disasters. So, and other thing that the natural disasters are, we are also not able to, prevent disasters. We cannot stop natural phenomena from happening, but we can make them less damaging if we understand better why they happen and what we can do to prevent or mitigate. Since people are partly responsible for disasters happening, we have to change what we are doing wrong in order to avoid or reduce the impact of natural phenomena. And every community, every citizen must get to know its own features and surroundings, the natural environment as well as environmental built by human beings. So this is the only way for any community, any human being or any citizen to manage the hazards that surround it and to reduce its own vulnerability to these hazards. So my question is, can we prevent natural disasters?
Very happy to see this interpretation, sir. I think the very appropriate logic you have placed. We have to work on improving reducing the vulnerability and improving the capacity. And if we improve the capacity, coping capacity, and reduce vulnerability, obviously the impact of the hazard when it turns into a disaster will be minimum. You have said it very aptly. So I agree with you fully, and we may not be able to prevent any disaster. Maybe in some cases we can prevent disasters, but we cannot prevent hazard. But definitely we can prevent disaster in many cases, and in most cases we will definitely minimize the impact of the disasters. That is absolutely possible, and the whole the effort is towards that.
Thanks. Thank you.
सचान जी हैं? सचान जी कुछ बोलना चाहते हैं?
नो सर, अभी इसमें मैं कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं इसमें मैं क्रिएट कर पाया हूँ.
अच्छा, निशांत?
Thank you, sir, once again for a very, very wonderful presentation. And some of my questions, which I was like, when you were giving the presentations, I was thinking about them. And in your lecture itself, you addressed a lot of them, especially about the risk assessment. And because, that is one thing which uh, I've been thinking since the Chamoli disaster, like since Kedarnath, what kind of risk assessment mechanisms had come up, but you have already like addressed that question in your presentation, that it is very difficult to figure out like if the kind of risk assessment which is happening right now in the Himalayan region. And the other point, actually, you have also mentioned briefly about it, about the risk communication amongst the stakeholders. So there, sir, am not a subject expert on the matter, but I just wanted to know if these people are building, I mean, if somebody is building a dam, and if an agency is undertaking building a dam or some, other, giant structures, these projects must be insured. So what even if the engineering community or the other scientists community are not able to analyze these risk analysis, or were not able to do it in a very efficient manner, what about this insurance sector? I mean, if there is one, so what is happening there? Because they are losing money, because they are not able to figure out, like, these kind of disasters will happen, and if they have insured it, they have to pay. So somebody is paying, uh, but I'm not sir, really sure like how the insurance business works in these areas, if it does work. So, sir, I would just want to know your comment on that, sir.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. um, the insurance aspect, I do not know whether all this infrastructure work that is going on in the Himalayan region are insured, or it has been indemnified by the government. So let us find it out. So,
Even I was
if it is insured, then obviously insurance company has got every right to ask these questions and all that, or insurance company would have gone into the details. But if it is not insured, and it is, or insurance company has insured it, and there is a government indemnity, then obviously that means we as a nation, we are prepared to accept the loss and damage. We have so it is a deliberate acceptance of the guilt. So this is one interpretation. The other important point which you mentioned about the risk communication, I like to share something, that in United States, after each disaster, there is a white paper presented to the Senate.
okay, sir. Right. Yeah.
And they in that white paper, the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Authority, presents that what happened, why it happened, and how it was handled, and what are the learnings out of that, and what are the government systems and processes, what are the changes that are going to be done based on the incident. So this is done. But unfortunately, we do not have this in our provision in our Disaster Management Act. I think communication people like you must say, begin to say that to improve the accountability of the state, this should be there. And when you and then in America also there is something called public hearing. In every disaster, when the government presents this, I think they should also allow public hearing. Let the environment people tell, let the community also tell, let the laborers speak, let the companies who have invested a huge sum of money in making this infrastructure, let them also speak. So let there be a public hearing, let there be an informed discussion, and based on which the white paper should be prepared and placed in the parliament. I think that will compel us to become responsive and accountable. It is not that I made a mistake, you didn't make a mistake, or you didn't tell me, I didn't know it. That's not the escape route. Escape route is, let's learn from our mistakes and There is a process by which we will learn from a mistake. But there has to be willingness to learn from mistake. If you do not want to learn from mistakes, then like you say that it is not a man-made disaster, it is a natural disaster, so we can't do anything, so matter closed. If that is the way we want to look at it, this is unfortunate.
So let's open it to the students. Any student want to ask any question?
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
Sir, during the time when we construct dams and all, sir, a blasting technique is used. So, is this blasting technique, sir, hazardous for places nearby?
Yeah, blasting obviously, when you blast, you create vibration, and when you create vibration, obviously it disturbs the structure. How is a mountain? Mountain is the stones and the mud, the trees, everything is just is a compact manner. So it is not a homogeneous structure, it is a heterogeneous structure. So when there is a blast, it will definitely create vibration, and vibration will loosen the structure. So it's a dangerous. So therefore, there is something called controlled blasting. So many places controlled blasting is done. You must have seen that the top buildings are being demolished through a controlled blasting. It just in a limited time it comes down and all that kind of thing. Whether the controlled blasting was used in this case or not, or blasting was totally not used, I don't know.
And sir, is this creation of dams, sir, is this triggering natural disasters? Basically, we create dam for multi-purpose things, but it is somehow disturbing our this geographical things. So, sir, does creation of dam trigger natural disasters?
No, it is difficult to say that the dams cause natural disaster. No, that's wrong to say that. But a dam built at an inappropriate location in an inappropriate manner will create disaster. That's way I'll interpret it. Now, in India, we have got so many dams. A lot of dams are getting older. So the dam burst is going to be a new phenomena of new disasters. So government is now doing a dam audit. Is the dam health audit is going on the countrywide. Central Water Commission is doing that. So a lot of good things are happening. But dam per se is not bad. I'll not say that dams should not be made to avoid disasters. No.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for, as we discussed, it's exactly 1 hour after we started the presentation, and certainly gave us some insight, some food for thought, and we would be happy to work over it, to go through it in much greater detail, especially the points that you gave about different kinds of analysis that will certainly provide food for thought. We are greatly benefited from this, and we are extremely grateful for your time. Thank you, and again, we would like to maybe engage your attention in some of the topic, especially in the topics of your expertise, and if at all there are requirements in the coming days. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm grateful. I'm very much thankful for your time, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Giri. Thank you, Dr. Mohanty. Thank you, the faculty. Thank you, my dear students.
Thank you, sir.